Welcome to episode 403 of the Broadcasters Podcast. This is King of Podcasts here with you. Feel somber. I don't feel like throwing on an opener. I had so many other topics to go and bring up on the program tonight. Just going through Howard Stern's contract negotiations. Could have been talking about the VMAs and how well it did, because I really did enjoy it. And the ratings were so good about it. There's now talk that Paramount wants to go ahead and merge with Warner Brothers Discovery. And the Ellison family wants to go ahead and put money down to take up the whole media company. FCC doing a quadrennial review to go ahead and look at ownership rights. All these topics I will be talking about right now off the top. But some 33 hours ago as I record tonight, we had a political assassination. And it has been the talk of 32 or some odd hours ever since we heard the initial story of conservative podcaster, radio host, founder of Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk, being shot. And then you go on X, and you can see several angles of how he got shot. One shot from a rifle, carotid artery, instant impact, no chance of recovering. No chance of survival from that shot. Open air, 3,000 people. The shooter only had one target. No mass shooting. And then the response on social media. Listen, X has now become a haven of free speech. Somewhat to a fault, because now you can see everything. Not only can you see everything, but social media, you can also get a full spectrum of opinions and beliefs of people and how they feel about everything. To the point that people are willing to go ahead and feel like if you don't like what somebody says, regardless of the kind of human being they are, it's grounds for elimination. And what bothers me, not so much the social media types that are actually doing that kind of content, because, yeah, it's on them, but they're not smart enough to understand what they're doing. It's pretty obvious. About 95% of people that see this taking a human life, it's one thing when it's somebody that's a murderous, lecherous, common criminal who has done so much that deserves an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. A deserved elimination. But someone who is looking for debate, and the idea is that that's grounds to remove him from society, remove him from the world. Send him to the man upstairs. A good Christian man. Father, husband, and beloved by lots of people. But politics make a big deal about it. Now, I can't make anything about what some people will get to have as their perception of how politics are. It's an extreme to think that because of someone's politics, they are guilty to be executed. Guilty by penalty of death. And so everybody talks about, who could be judged during the executioner? Well, the shooter was. And he has his peers that celebrated this demise on social media. But I don't want to talk about them. It goes much farther. How do they get indoctrinated? Partly colleges, academia. Absolutely. But where else do people get their information from to where they can be indoctrinated and they can be thought of to be given opinions that might not be with the full spectrum of content available at their fingertips or for them to see? It's the media. The media has been complicit for many years, 40 years plus. Politics of the ownership of the corporations that have been deregulating, getting deregulation more and more, and making it where television stations, cable networks, the advent of the 24-hour news cycle, and cable network television. It started off as it was meant to be. The news and nothing but the news. And you could have your commentary, you could have your political commentary here and there. We had shows for that. But when you decide to go and put it on a news program, okay, listen, we had Firing Line, we had McLaughlin Group, we had Washington Week, we had, other shows out there that could do that. You had Sunday morning shows that could talk about that. Meet the Press, This Week, and Face the Nation. Those were all around. So if you want to have the political commentary, did it need to be a spectator sport? Do we need to get to the point where it just got very popular just to go ahead and put out people that we really don't care about, that we just think about every 4 years or 2 years when they are going to be reelected, their campaigns, and how the government is? I mean, it's obvious that people are going to have their opinions about thinking, well, they need more government in their lives, or people who want less government. That's always been clear. But that's politics. But it's the way the media portrays it. And the fact that they do not care about the simple tenets of journalism anymore. Much like every other medium has gone through the digital disruption. This is the kind of stuff I used to talk about before 2020. Where in my initial episodes of the Broadcasters Podcast, when I called it creative and not corporate, I tried to go into this route of talking about the media and going after it. And you know what? For a long time, I kind of just let it go. Stopped. But a story like this, the political assassination in cold blood of one Charlie Kirk, now I have to go and start talking about this again. Because the media needs to be called out for what's going on. And trust me, every cable network that's on television is complicit. The news networks, with their programming, also complicit. Because there are people in there with their own modus operandi, their own agenda, or they are following and carrying the water of corporate media that is telling them what to report and how to report, and how to alienate and ostracize one side of political thinking to another. Because if you don't follow one line of thinking, then it's not like you get ignored. Which, for me, I would rather be ignored than instead what the media does. Put a big, huge spotlight on what you don't like. Do people understand that? This political assassination is a culmination of a lot of things that happened from what the media has been portraying for years. You could say it's an evolution of things that have changed over time. Ideology that is called woke, or you have things that are presented in a way that everything is commentary. Everything is editorial. There is no murkiness anymore between getting to know what the story is and letting someone think for themselves and letting them disseminate what the information is. Okay? Network and cable news could give us what is imperative. What we absolutely should know about in our world and be informed. Newspapers? No. That whole dynamic of newspapers, radio, and television, that's done. Because of the failure of media companies, traditional, conventional, linear media companies, you have pushed everybody to the internet. When you could have held on to some semblance of being an authority and continue to report the news, it's bad enough you don't even cover the rest of the world. You only cover what's in America and what Americans might care about. So you've already isolated the rest of the world. You don't even know how the rest of the world operates, what their government is like, what their people, their culture is like. No. You make it only about America. And for certain sectors of America, you create this culture that has been commercialized, that's been created out of something else, politically charged, politically driven. And anybody else with an outside thought is completely ostracized. And I'm not talking about politics. I'm talking about anybody that comes from another country. all this here. Listen, we're not going to have the politics of the friendly debate. The days of Crossfire are over. When the show Crossfire went to another direction, that was one of the shows that got people kind of interested in going. Evans and Novak. Once those guys are gone, you started putting other people into play. Yeah, everything changed. We don't need to talk about the politicians. See, because of something that's happening, this tragic story, the story being told of Charlie Kirk, look who we have to report about this. People that could care less about this guy, whether he lived or died. Could care less about his supporters. And if they do care, they're just being told to do the opposite. You have corrupt politicians on every channel, sanctimonious, hypocritical, saying what they need to say in order to save face. Because the media doesn't want to cover what's really going on. They don't want to cover what's on social media. The real story, the real dynamic of the culture. You know why? Because they lost them. They lost them. Younger demographics, older demographics, you have a lot of people that now have to go into the cesspool that is social media to find their news. Remember, X is one of the largest outlets for news consumption today. And whose fault is that? That's the conventional corporate media. You let that happen. You're complicit in this. You push people away. And the ones you're holding on to by indoctrination, by brainwashing, because you make people just go ahead and stay polarized to one side or the other. And that's not good either. I'm not looking for fairness doctrine here, okay? I never thought that was necessary either. Any particular media company can go ahead and do what they want to make their money. But why the FCC or other entities out there never regulated these companies to label themselves in terms of their content, in terms of their programming, okay? We don't have the idea that any news programming on any channel is just going to be news. There's no such thing. Everybody has commentary. The commentary doesn't even have to be by somebody that's a panelist or a commentator that's being brought on to speak about something. Trust me, it goes into the stories themselves. The scripts, they also have the narrative in there. And where do they learn that from? Hard copy, inside edition of Current Affair. Because in order to try to keep an audience, they couldn't just try to keep themselves focused on the straight and narrow and just report the news, damn it. No, they chose to go like a tabloid because he realized that persuasion works. Inside edition, hard copy, Current Affair. Inside edition is still popular today. Okay? And if you listen to some of the programming on these said networks, on all the places, you see the way they talk. And you have all these people from academia that have all been, okay, here we go. All Ivy Leaguers that come onto these shows have no touch with the real world, no touch with the outside world of everyday people, middle class, lower class, whatever. They have no idea, completely out of touch, out of tune. And they're the ones that get to speak for everybody else. In podcasting, at least we do have a spectrum of different thoughts, different opinions, everything like that. But they're also been brainwashed and have been brought in a direction because of what is being brought on, because they always talk about what the media says. They always have to talk about what this particular program says or what this particular program says, and they have to comment on it. How many of those political shows do you hear about that are either on YouTube or Rumble, or you find audio on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and you catch how many of them are actually taking clips from all these different news programs, all these different channels? We got a comment about this. This person said something, clickbait, 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 whatever. How many of them are actually taking comments that are being said by people that are out there, that have large followings? I mean, I appreciate that at least on social media, there are certain people that are just out there to be entertainers and just enjoy themselves. But then the people that are political, you know what? You sway away from them if you don't want to hear from them. But then you have also people that they are meant to be one thing in the social construct, in the larger picture, that people know them for, and they decide to interject their politics. But there was a time where, like in Hollywood, we'd have celebrities that could interject their politics, okay? Fine. But we kind of laughed at them. We kind of mocked them. It's like, all right, yeah, whatever. You're just, go act. Go direct something, okay? And then you have people that started paying attention to their opinions and started believing in them and started listening to their advocacy. Because people started thinking, oh, we should listen to them. And why? I don't know. But journalism doesn't want to do what they're supposed to do. Of this particular story about Charlie Kirk, absolutely, the story is about his family and his background. There's an amazing story behind him. Trust me, in a couple of years, we will probably see a biopic about him, and people will be amazed by the story of this young man at 31 years old, gunned down by some wicked, evil assailant. And then maybe things might be a different thought process about him because he'll be thought in a different light because he's not been in that regular echo chamber that's out there for one side or the other and how they feel about him. A couple of years removed, we might get a different feel of this man. And people might look at him differently. So that story is one thing. We don't have to go and tell that story right now. It's important to go and point some of those things out to focus on the fact of who this person means to the people that are close to him and those that follow his message or work with him or are involved in his plight and his mission, which will continue. There's no doubt about that. No, in the news right now, I want to hear about, which is the only thing I want to hear about is, okay, tell me about finding the killer. So out of the 30 some odd hours we've had of coverage of this, the only time we hear any new information is from what law enforcement tells us in Utah, that we hear about that. And a couple little things here about the killer, and we're seeing some surveillance photos, some surveillance footage from Ring cameras and other places. Getting closer to the suspect, they also found the weapon. So like those kind of things, that's the important part. But this 24-hour cycle of everyone getting involved and just, okay, the outpouring of support, wonderful. Does everyone need to have a place right now to go and outpour the support? We can have that when we get to memorialize him at a funeral in so many days where that can happen. But right now, this death is still fresh in everybody's mind. So give people a chance to go ahead and compartmentalize this. Let's not talk about narratives. The news should be focusing on helping to find the killer that did this of such a large event. Gather the details. Go find the people that are talking about this. Like more of that needs to be happening. Eyewitness accounts, if possible. Focusing on the parents of the students and the students themselves that are traumatized now forever for being a part of this event. Because if you saw what happened on X, when you actually saw the actual killing in real time and you could see it, you don't want to see that again. It's gruesome. But it has been acceptable. And that's the biggest problem of all this. That the media wants to go ahead and just glorify and glamorize this whole thing for themselves. Because for the news networks, the cable news networks, this is ratings right now. Oh, they have people glued to their TV sets like it's 9/11 all over again, which is 24 years ago today as I record. The same thing now with, like, say, if it's COVID. You got everybody watching on TV wall to wall. And that's what the cable networks want. To have that constant viewership right now. They have them. How long can we hold on to them, the producers and the people there are thinking about? How long can we run this story? How long can we drag this story along? I mean, they don't want to talk about anything else. That's the other thing. The laziness, where there's other news going on. Don't get me wrong. I understand the importance of this story. But when there's news, we have additional news, report on it. But do we need to go ahead and linger on with this now? No, because social media is doing just a good enough job of that right now as it is. The media doesn't have to go and do that themselves. But think about the years and years of indoctrination, of brainwashing, of manipulation, persuasion, gaslighting that has been put out there by these narcissists that think they're better than you, they think they know more than you, that are either reading a teleprompter or commenting like they think they know everything, when they're just as bad as somebody doing sports coverage where somebody's supposed to talk about the NBA and they don't even watch the games. Poorly read, poorly educated, somewhat silver-spooned, privileged people on a lot of these channels who can't understand everyday life, could never understand the street, could never understand anything outside of their little bubble. It was a few years ago, I remember talking about, what was it, University of Wisconsin, and the professors there talking about like 95% of journalists are inside of their own bubble. They don't get outside of it. So the journalists themselves, the people reporting, the anchors, all those people, they don't even get outside of their own bubble. They don't know what real life is like. They have no clue. So they're lost. That's why social media is the haven that people go to for news. Because where else are you going to go? People might go to Google or Apple because they'll get their news curated. And that's where the hope of these journalistic outlets, whether it's the cable news, network news, or magazines, newspapers, hope they can get some viewers, some eyeballs to their product, to their content. For magazines and publishers, they're just hoping they can continue to get that kind of viewership to their websites until AI decides to go ahead. These AI companies decide to go ahead and decide, okay, we've already kept you guys afloat for long enough. We're going to buy your intellectual property at pennies on the dollar. Goodbye. We'll take all this over. Thank you very much. Don't be surprised if in 10 years, Billboard or Sports Illustrated or Time Magazine or Newsweek or some of these, they're going to be run just like they would normally be run, but it'll be AI running it. It won't be actual journalists. They'll be data entry people feeding the AI system that they'll write the stories. It doesn't do me any good to go ahead and start chastising anybody individually. It's the whole thing is corrupt. It's a cesspool. It's sewage. The corporate media that's out there, anything that's not local news, okay? Anything that's not local news. All your cable outlets, all of them. And sure, there might be some organizations that might do a little more of trying to go and play to both sides, but they're not that big enough to shake the apple cart. Okay? Look, there might be News Nation that tries to give a couple different sides of opinion, or Newsmax, and I talked to Chris Ruddy, right? Some of those, there might be some other outlets out there that, you know, they at least try to go a little bit more into moderating and trying to be a little more objective in their commentary. But that doesn't mean that the commentary doesn't even be necessary. That's the other part that I don't want either. We don't need this rotating cast of characters coming on to tell us stuff that we just want to hear about ourselves and let us figure it out. Why can't we just do that? It's just not allowed. And this is why the media continues to erode. This is why the integrity of media continues to go falling apart. And this is why more students are not going in to be journalists. Who wants to be part of that psychological mind twist right there? From the people you have to work for to the people you're trying to indoctrinate and trying to warp their minds and warp their opinions so they don't know what's right from wrong. Because the media, at the end of the day, they're complicit on the kind of hateful, divisive, scorching rhetoric that's out there. First of all, you let these politicians get to go and spew their shit on television on a regular basis. We don't need to hear from them about that stuff. You want to find out? Tell us when you got a bill ready to sign, okay? Tell us about the bills. Tell us how you're trying to fix this country instead of pointing fingers at other people. Why aren't you doing something? You're getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars, plus whatever you're making on the side from kickbacks or whatever other shit. Why don't we hear from the people about what you're actually doing, progressing along, what you are doing with people's money, right? The American people's money. Why don't we find out what that's going on? Wouldn't that be smart? Oh, it just doesn't make money. Well, it used to. And whose fault is it for you to lose that audience that would actually have cared? Because people don't have trust in the media anymore. At all. Trust in the media is a punchline. Do you understand that? And I was going into media some 30 years ago. 32 years ago. I'm ashamed of the institution now. Ashamed. It's an embarrassment. And to think I used to spend hours and hours watching CNN or Fox News or MSNBC or BBC and catching political commentary on talk radio. Whoever it was. Rush Limbaugh, Randy Rhoads, Sean Hannity, Tom Likas, Bill Hendry, Ed Schultz. I wish I didn't listen to any of that stuff. As I said, politics is just an ugly soap opera. It's not even good. The people don't even look that good in either. Okay? Also, the fall of Hollywood. Hollywood's so concerned about politics in the first place. Why aren't you doing some films that people care about? Quit rehashing, recycling shit. We're getting more into scripted programming now, getting off of streaming services. They've already been taking it off of network TV and off of cable TV. So we can't even do make-believe stories, give ourselves a suspension of disbelief, make some movies where I have suspension of disbelief when things are tough. Think about this. So this weekend, I'm going to go see an anime movie that's going to get my mind off all this shit. And football, at least I got that. But other than that, I can't think of one TV show I'd watch right now that I haven't already watched, okay? I can watch a lot of older programming that was really good and great. But how much else out there that's good? You got lower budgets, less time, less content out there of good programming. But there's a lot of content out there that's just not good. And to filter through it, who wants that either? It is kind of tough to say, hey, you get a freedom to have whatever you want. You can watch whatever you want. Yeah, but everything is so micro-sized now. There's no such thing as something that is like a large viewing experience. It's very hard to find that. And the only things we can actually really rally around that we'll enjoy is live sports and, some of this stuff. I wish we could talk more about that. They'll tell the MTV Awards, the VMAs, that was fun to watch on social media and go on and catch live. I enjoyed that. What a good moment on Sunday. CBS got a good audience. I loved it. It was great. And then we got this kind of stuff going on. This headline was unnecessary. This should not be a story. Hey, for the news media, let's just say the quiet part out loud. You're happy this happened. You're enjoying the viewership. You're enjoying that your advertisers are getting looked at for a change. This is what you want. You feed off of this because this creates grief, anger, resentment. Oh, this is like the 5 senses for you people. These large media companies, you have no shame. You're soulless, you're black, you're cold, you're heartless. Black-hearted. You don't care about people, you don't care about anybody. Your bottom line, your shareholders. I don't like to talk about you. The news media, I don't like to talk about it anymore. Notice I've stopped talking about it. I try to avoid it. Waste of my breath. You don't matter to me anymore. So now that I got that off my chest, one other Stalin story I want to get to before we get into the stories that I had planned to go and talk about this week. Todd Cochran, previously founder of the Geek News Central, one of the first podcasts out there. One of the earliest to secure advertising and podcasting. The founder of Blueberry with no E's. And Raw Voice, which is a major podcast platform that he created. Podcast host. An analytics platform. Blueberry is still one of the most biggest independent companies working with more than 150,000 podcasters. Died at the age of 61. One of the early adopters of podcasting and saw potential of on-demand audio transitioning from a quarter-century career in the U.S. Navy into civilian life. A retired senior chief petty officer, he used his Navy Tech background to launch Raw Voice in 2005, focused on podcast advertising. Credit on striking the first podcast ad deal with GoDaddy, and quickly moved to bigger things, statistics and hosting in 2006 with the launch of Blueberry Podcasting, and in the 2 decades since, has done a lot of work. Had the new media show that he was doing with Rob Greenlee for many years. And very important pioneer passing away. Godspeed, Todd Cochran from Blueberry News and Raw Voice. I mentioned the VMAs, which I thought they turned out really well. I enjoyed the show. Some people might have thought it was a little bit boring, but for CBS, I thought LL Cool J did masterful when it came to hosting. The legendary performances with Mariah Carey and Lady Gaga, good stuff. Ariana Grande winning a lot of awards. CBS getting another 1.5 million viewers to go and watch the telecast. 5.5 million viewers. Awesome. And there were a lot of stars that are like in the here and now that have gotten very popular. Sabrina Carpenter with a good performance. Somber, Cat's Eye, Alex Warner was pretty cool. Like, I listened to all these songs, and it was all good. It's like, okay, I enjoyed it. I also was going up against quite a bit of things when it came to Sunday Night Football, also going on at the same time. But I enjoyed it. It was good. Good show, quite a bit all together. Billboard put a pretty good story about the VMAs being in a pretty good place with all these pop stars, but with all the legacy medleys. Because there were the other acts coming out to go and perform. Busta Rhymes also performed. He was pretty good. Like of the legend acts, they did very well. No rust to them. I feel like that much anyway. The question they were asking about is the VMAs, who are they putting the show on for the first place? The kids who have been the lifeblood of the channel's audience for over 40 years now, or the millennials who actually remember when music videos on MTV still moved the culture? They want to say it's a question whose answer the VMAs annually attempts to split the difference between. So there was a talk about the artists that were there on Sunday night, basically in full effect. Superstars who'd already made their share of VMA history, rising hitmakers who seem poised to potentially do so in the future, and could easily lose track with them all the stage and screen time given the legacy artists, often without a particular urgency to their performances and stack within the first 2 hours of the broadcast. Oh yeah, Ricky Martin also getting awards, getting a Latin Icon Award as part of all this. And listen, they all perform really well. What I want to find out, the performance of the VMAs, is when we get to the Billboard's charts this week, after the week ends up, we'll see what Spotify shows us right away about how much of a bump any of the artists got from their performances on the VMAs. Because in Britain, they had the Britpop Awards, it gets a bump. If an artist plays at Glastonbury, they get a bump. Things like that. When it comes for American artists, it's the Super Bowl, usually. And maybe the Grammys gets a little bit of a bump. But the VMAs, I want to see if they do give a bump, given where it was on. Because if people are not watching necessarily on TV, loads of streaming across social media because you saw clips all over the place. Just saying. Tate McRae, incredible in the dance up. Sabrina Carpenter, great performance, like I said. Somber, Conan Gray. Like, I wasn't disappointed by anybody. Caught the whole show. And I was pretty... Youngblood doing Ozzy Osbourne tributes. That was great stuff with Aerosmith going out there. Loved it. Really, really good stuff across the board. I thought they did a pretty good job. I enjoyed it. I don't care about what Andy Cohen did in some very weak prank to say, oh, Howard Stern is not going to be at Sirius any longer, that he's being replaced before his contract's up. What, such a weak idea. And they're saying it's Howard's idea. Whatever. I've seen that prank done better by other radio stations. Example, the Love Doctors WZZR back in the 90s. And the thing was, it was such a bad prank, but it was so good because the commentary of the callers made it so funny. And the other thing was that when they did the change of the supposed format, that that you could hear the hosts of the program laughing their asses in the background, hearing everything being done, that they could hear that it was a full joke. But it was an April Fool's prank, and it was really well done. Which, by the way, yeah, Howard, April Fool's. That's what it's supposed to be. It's a poor idea. Even you should know better than that. Howard Stern did acknowledge on Monday, finally returning from a long hiatus, that he's still trying to hammer out a deal to renew his contract with SiriusXM. Not clear how many listeners Stern has these days, but last deal was 2020, $100 million a year. So he really didn't see too much of it. Still says he has a great relationship with Sirius, whatever. But no contract's been signed yet. And they thought doing something here to show he was unceremoniously being shown the exit didn't work. It was a weak effort at best. I did mention that the FCC is looking to go ahead and look at ownership rules once again and their September open meeting. Quadrennial review. The 2022 quadrennial review of media ownership rules. So Brendan Carr, the FCC chairman, says they're looking comments on the local radio ownership rule, limiting the total number of radio stations that may be commonly owned in a local market. The local television rule, also limiting a single entity for more than 2 television stations in the same market. And the dual network rule, prohibiting a merger between or among the big 4 broadcast networks. So that is now in play. The September open meeting will be on September 30th. So in a couple of weeks, we will keep an eye on that and keep you posted here on the Broadcasters Podcast. An interesting story here from TikTok and their music service for artists to be able to stream their content and put their content somewhere. Sound On, now reaching over 1 million artists. It's now expanding into Germany. So it has not made it into the U.S. yet, but it's made it into other markets. Currently, Sound On has 1.158 million partners. And these artists have been accessing services since 2022. So the Germany rollout marks distribution and services platform's latest expansion following the initial launch to the UK, US, Brazil, Indonesia, and Australia. The launch in Germany allows local artists to distribute their songs across major streaming platforms like Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, SoundCloud, Deezer, Pandora, and more. And the artist can also upload the music directly to TikTok. And they've already had a couple of successful stories with some of the stars they've worked with on Sound On. There's the Austrian DJ Eli Oaks, having accumulated 750,000 TikTok followers. His track Borderline reaching number 17 on the German charts after going viral. South African-German artist Wiz DMC, who did the song Bees and Honey, which made it number 3 in the Germany and UK. A remix with artist Tyla generated over 500 million streams on Spotify. And Wiz DMC now has more than 29 million monthly listeners on Spotify. They're prominent artists, if you have not listened to them outside of the U.S. Just saying, it's a big deal. And finally, there are early talks right now that the just merged Paramount Skydance is looking to explore a bid to acquire Warner Bros. Discovery. So, the chairman and co-founder of Oracle, Larry Ellison, one of the richest people in the world, was able to do the $8.4 billion deal to get Paramount Global transaction closed in August, and now they're looking at Warner Brothers next. The focus had been on Warner Brothers Studios in the process of separating the company from the company's global cable networks and linear television, but the deal being explored right now could be for the entire company. So take it at that. Keep an eye on that as well. So anyway, we'll leave it there. And I appreciate all of you for listening to me on the early onset of this program. I hope I don't have to talk like this again. Anything politically or anything about bashing the media, because I don't want to do this anymore. I want to get back to talk about content that's more important. And the media that's more important to me is entertainment, music, radio, television. I want to get back to that because that's my love. News media, I lost that interest a long time ago. It's just, I look at it with cynicism and regret and disappointment. Great disappointment. Come back next week for the Broadcasters Podcast. Hopefully I'll be in a much better mood. Rest in peace, Charlie Kirk. And remember, the content is king, and the control of your content is in your hands.